Hey there guys, Spexy here and welcome back to Retrospexx. Now this week, one of the all-time classic arcade beat-em-ups has its 30th birthday. That's right guys, this is a game by SEGA. Look at the artwork behind me, you can probably tell what it is. It is of course the classic Altered Beast. Now this game is considered by many to be the forerunner of the Golden Axe series, and I say this because of one thing. Take a look at that funny looking pink and yellow critter right there, known affectionately in both series as the chicken leg. I guess because of its resemblance to maybe a chicken drumstick, or the fact that it looks like a plucked chicken with just a couple of legs. I'm not sure really, but in any case it appears in both games. Except one game, Altered Beast, is set in ancient Greece and the other game is set in the fantasy land of Uria. So yeah, how does that work exactly? So SEGA released Altered Beast to the arcades in 1988 and it became one of a multitude of side-scrolling beat-em-ups available for people at that time. Only this one coined the immortal phrase, "Rise from your grave," which would be remembered fondly by gamers for years to come. So what was the game about exactly? Well, it was set in ancient Greece, as we've already discussed, and it cast you in the role of a Roman centurion brought back from the dead by the mighty Greek god Zeus in a quest to find his daughter Athena, who'd been kidnapped by the evil sorceress Neph. With me so far? Because here it gets a little stranger, because you are not just an ordinary centurion. Oh no, you have the ability to alter your form into that of a beast, hence the name Altered Beast. See what they did there? Now the game would see you fighting your way through numerous levels in an attempt to overthrow Neph and his evil minions, and at the end of each of those levels you would have to face off against Neph himself in one of his many incarnations as an ever increasingly challenging boss monster. Now although your own transformations may not be as big or as bad as Neph's, you do get to become many wondrous and magical creatures in your quest to defeat him, first of which will be this werewolf who has the ability to throw fireballs at his enemy and also to transform himself into a big cone of fire which lashes across the screen, incinerating everything in its path. Now although most of this may be cosmetic, and actually there's nothing much different to this and many other side-scrolling beat-em-ups, the game was quite popular in its time, and due to this it spawned many a release on the consoles and computers of the day, and we're going to take a look at a few of those ports now. Be warned, evil lies ahead. So first up, the ZX Spectrum version of the game, and I think that rather red-faced looking fellow on the screen right now is supposed to be Zeus, but then I guess his daughter's been kidnapped so we can excuse him this once. Now as we go into the main game here, you'll notice that it's a big jumble of multicoloured mess and you can hardly discern anything that's going on the screen right now. Oh right, that white blob was actually supposed to be a wolf, was it? I thought it was a rock or something. That just goes to show what I'm talking about with the graphics in this game. If I was to describe them as shitty, that would be a huge compliment. Now I think the developers were going for a lot of detail here and they probably went for too much. That combined with the Spectrum's technical limitations has produced what I can only describe as an unplayable mess of a game. Avoid this at all costs. Now it does however have music and it's not too bad for a Spectrum game, but that's about all it's got going for it. Next up then we have the MSX version, and as you can see, not a lot of difference in visuals apart from the colours are a little bit more washed out down to the MSX colour palette. Now the only big difference here is the sound. The music is a lot better on the MSX and that's all, otherwise the game is just as terrible, and again do not play this game. Let's move on. And just when you thought things couldn't get any worse, here comes a version of the game which proves us all undoubtedly wrong, and it just so happens to be the Commodore 64 version, which is somewhat surprising seeing as the Commodore was actually quite a popular gaming machine in its day. Now yes, I'll admit that the visuals are a little bit clearer and you can see what's going on the screen, but you have to remember that this machine had one of the most advanced sound chips in the form of the SID chip, and music was always paramount in a Commodore 64 game. However, for some reason this game has no music at all. What were you thinking, Activision? Now I can find no excuse for this and I think we need to move on before I lose my temper. Now it actually pains me somewhat to say that the best version on 8-bit computer is actually the Amstrad CPC version, and that's saying something. Yep, very colourful but still pretty awful. Let's move on. Now there are still two 8-bit versions of the game to speak of, and those are both console ports. So firstly then, the NES version that you can see on the screen right here, and although this doesn't look anything like the arcade machine, I'll be honest there, it is quite clear to see what's going on. It has all the characters and the gameplay elements, even the music's pretty funky. I think this is actually a pretty decent attempt at it for an 8-bit machine. and then moving on to the Master System. Well, actually, as an 8-bit machine goes, this does a fantastic job of a port of this game. Now maybe it's because it's made by Sega and the game belongs to Sega and they put that extra effort in, but in any case, this is definitely the best 8-bit version available to play. Now, as much as I may be a PC gamer today, back in the 80s, DOS did definitely not make a good platform to port arcade games to. The DOS version of this game may look reasonably okay, but trust me, it is still pretty dismal. So moving into the 16-bit generation of machines, you'd expect not to be disappointed, wouldn't you? Well, don't expect too much guys, because I'm sure there'll be disappointment abound as we take a look at the two titans of 16-bit home computing, the ST and the Amiga versions of this game. So starting with the ST one then, looks pretty good, actually pretty comparable to the arcade I guess, you can kind of tell what everything is, still not exactly how you'd like it to be, and the sound leaves a lot to be desired. So moving on to the Amiga version, graphically not a great deal of difference, probably slightly improved, but the sound is definitely a little bit better. Still nowhere near where we'd want it to be, and I definitely still would not recommend playing these ports of the game. We've yet to find a good version of this game guys. There has to be one out there, right? Now, you need not worry guys, because I actually believe there are 3 good versions of this game and I'm going to go through them in reverse order, leaving the best to last. In 3rd position is probably the most widely played version of this game to date, and no, it's not the arcade version, this is in fact the Genesis or Mega Drive version of the game. I'm sure a lot of you out there will have played it, it was a massive hit back in the day and it still holds up pretty well today. Now graphically it's not quite as good as the arcade, but it's not too far off, the sound is pretty good, it's got all the levels, all the power-ups, all the characters and everything you would expect. Sega did an awesome job of porting their arcade hit over to their home console. And yeah, this is definitely a contender to the crown. However, there are 2 more versions of this game that I would place above this, so let's find out what they are. In 2nd position is the TurboGrafx 16 version of the game, and this is probably as close as you will get to having an arcade machine in your own home, short of putting an arcade machine in your own home, which can take up a little bit of space. Trust me, I've owned a few. Now graphically it's pretty much on par with the original, the sound's pretty awesome too, but above all of that, the control here is so fluid, so responsive, that you almost feel like you are playing the arcade machine, and that's saying something. Now I know TurboGrafx 16s are pretty hard to come by, particularly in this country, and they're still quite expensive to buy, but if you do get a chance to play this game on one, do yourself a favour and do so, it's definitely worth it. Even if the only way you can play the TurboGrafx version of Altered Beast is through emulation, then I still cannot recommend it enough. Get out there, try it, you will not regret it. In the top spot, and it should come as no surprise, is the original classic Altered Beast arcade cabinet by Sega. No port on any machine will ever beat the original arcade game, and to prove it I'm going to play this game out to end my video and see how far I can get. If you want to watch me, go ahead and do so, and if not, I'm glad you've watched the video so far and hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. If you have, then why not spank the hell out of that thumbs up button, subscribe if you like my content, and don't forget to ding that bell to make sure you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, I'm going to play this game out, and I look forward to looking backwards with you in the next episode. See you soon.
Welcome to your doom.